A chief returns home. Walter Crane had spent years believing in doing things the right way. At 55 years old, he had finally returned to his hometown. It was a late evening, and Walter was driving his old pickup truck down a quiet stretch of highway. His truck had seen better days, but it was reliable, just the way he liked it. Wearing his usual red MAGA cap and a well-worn jacket, he felt right at home. The road was empty, the kind of solitude that lets your mind wander. Then, in the distance, flashing lights appeared in his rearview mirror. He muttered to himself, easing off the gas and pulling to the shoulder. He wasn't speeding, and his registration was up to date. Maybe a busted taillight? Either way, he wasn't worried. At least not yet. A routine. Stop turns hostile. Two officers approached the truck. Officer Brian Harper, tall and stocky with a perpetual smirk, led the way, while his partner, Derek Green, spun his baton arrogantly. "Evening, sir," Harper said, leaning against the driver's side door. "You know your headlight's out, right?" Walter nodded calmly. "Thanks for pointing that out, officer. I'll take care of it first thing tomorrow." He handed over his license and registration, keeping his tone respectful. No need to escalate things. Harper barely glanced at the documents while Green circled the truck, tapping the hood as if it were some kind of interrogation. "You seem awfully calm for someone pulled over on a deserted road," Green said, his voice laced with suspicion. "What's the hurry, Grandpa? Got somewhere important to be?" Walter raised an eyebrow but kept his cool. "Just heading home after a long day. No hurry." Green leaned closer, his eyes narrowing. "Uh-huh. And what's with the hat? Big fan of slogans, huh? Think that makes you special?" Walter exhaled slowly, resisting the urge to react. "Actually, I'm the new chief of police. I'm sure this is just a misunderstanding." For a second, the officers exchanged a glance. Then Harper burst out laughing. "Chief of police? That's rich. Next you'll tell us you're running for mayor." Green chuckled. "Yeah, and I'm the President of the United States. Good one." Before Walter could get another word in, Harper reached for the door handle. "Step out of the vehicle, sir. Let's make sure everything checks out." Walter frowned. "What for? I've given you all my documents. There's no need for this." "Now you're questioning procedure?" Harper shot back, his tone mocking. "Look, you either step out or we help you out. Your call." Walter knew better than to resist. He unbuckled his seatbelt and stepped out, standing tall despite the growing tension. Green moved in behind him, and without warning, yanked his arms back. A dangerous game begins. "Whoa, what's this about?" Walter asked, trying to keep his voice steady as Green slapped a pair of cuffs on him. "Just being thorough," Green smirked. "You know, in case you're not as innocent as you look." Harper rummaged through the truck, pulling out random items and tossing them onto the ground. A bag of groceries, a worn jacket, and finally, Walter's red cap. "Look at this," Harper said, holding up the cap like it was some kind of trophy. "Big patriot over here. Think this makes you untouchable?" Walter clenched his jaw. "You're making a mistake. Both of you." Green laughed as he tightened the cuffs. "Oh yeah? What are you going to do, Chief? Write us a strongly worded memo?" Harper tossed the cap back into the truck. "Relax, old man. We're just doing our job." Walter said nothing. He stood silently as they continued their search, knowing this wasn't about the headlight anymore. These men weren't interested in the truth. They were looking for an excuse, and as far as they were concerned, he'd already given them one. Harper and Green, still riding high on their misplaced authority, drove Walter further into isolation. The old pickup bumped along the uneven terrain, its headlights cutting through the darkness. But Walter wasn't watching the road. He was focused, calculating. If these two thought they could intimidate him, they had no idea who they were dealing with. Abandoned in the dark. Finally, the car screeched to a stop. Harper yanked open the passenger door, smirking. "All right, Grandpa, time for a little lesson in respect." Walter stepped out, his eyes scanning the area. It was deserted. No houses, no streetlights, just the oppressive silence of the forest. "This seems excessive," Walter said, his voice calm but firm. "If you got a problem with me, let's settle it back at the station." Harper chuckled, shaking his head. Oh, we'll get there. But first, we're going to make sure you understand the pecking order around here. Green appeared from the trunk, dragging a frayed rope. Bet you didn't think your night would end like this, huh, Chief? Walter stood tall, refusing to show fear. You're making a big mistake. Both of you. Before Walter could respond, they forced him against a rusted metal post, likely an old road marker left behind when the area was abandoned. Harper and Green worked quickly, tying the rope tightly around his chest and arms, securing him in place. The knots were rough, digging into his jacket, but Walter stayed silent. There we go, Green said, stepping back to admire their handiwork. Not so tough now, huh? Harper pulled out his phone and snapped a picture, the flash briefly illuminating Walter's face. Oh, don't worry, Chief. We'll let you go. Eventually. With that, they climbed back into their patrol car, the engine roaring to life. See you later, boss, Green called out, waving as they disappeared into the night. Walter was left alone. The ropes bit into his arms as he tested their strength, but they held firm. The cold wind cut through his clothes, and the forest seemed to press closer with each passing minute. Suddenly, a faint sound broke through the silence. A beam of light cut through the darkness, and a voice called out, gruff but curious. The flashlight swayed, finally landing on Walter tied to the post. The man holding it stepped closer. Sir, are you... What on earth happened here? The man asked, his voice a mix of shock and concern. Walter squinted against the flashlight's glare. Let's just say it's a long story. Can you help me get out of this? The man didn't hesitate. He set the flashlight down and pulled out a pocket knife. Whoever did this to you ought to be ashamed of themselves, he muttered, sawing through the ropes with precision. Within moments, Walter was free. He stumbled forward, catching himself on the post as blood rushed back into his hands and arms. Thank you, Walter said, flexing his stiff fingers. You have no idea how much I needed that. The man gave him a once-over, clearly trying to piece together what had happened. You sure you're all right? You look like you've been through the ringer. I'll live, Walter replied, straightening up. But I need to get back to the station. There are a couple of officers who've got some explaining to do. The ride back to the station was quiet, the hum of the old truck's engine the only sound cutting through the night. Walter stared out the window, his mind racing with plans. He'd dealt with bullies before, but this was a whole new level. By the time they pulled into the precinct's parking lot, he knew exactly what he had to do. Walter entered through the back door, avoiding the main floor. In his office, he sank into his chair, his fingers already moving to wake up his laptop. He plugged in the dashcam's memory card, scanning through the footage until he found what he was looking for. There it was, Harper and Green smirking like kids who thought they were untouchable. Their actions were all perfectly recorded. The audio was crystal clear too. Their sneering comments, their threats, everything. They didn't even bother to disable the camera. Walter muttered, shaking his head in disbelief. Amateurs. Morning sunlight filtered through the blinds of the precinct's break room, casting a warm glow on the two most unworried officers in the building. Harper and Green sat at a small table, sipping their coffee and exchanging smug grins. The door swung open, and the room's light, casual atmosphere evaporated in an instant. Good morning, gentlemen, Walter said, his voice calm but with an edge sharp enough to cut steel. Harper froze mid-sip, his cup slipping from his hand and shattering on the floor. Walter stepped forward, a folder tucked under his arm. He placed the folder on the table and opened it with deliberate precision, revealing printed stills from the dash cam footage. Each photo captured Harper and Green in all their glory, mocking Walter, tying him to the post, and posing like they'd just won a game. Green's mouth opened as if to protest, but no words came out. Harper looked like he wanted to disappear. Walter leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous level. Your actions are a disgrace to this badge, this department, and this community. You've got 5 minutes to pack up your desks and hand over your badges. Consider yourselves lucky I'm not having you escorted out in cuffs, but make no mistake, you will be facing the consequences of your actions. Slowly, Harper and Green rose from their chairs, their heads down as they shuffled out of the break room, the weight of their actions finally sinking in. Walter watched them go, his expression unreadable as the door closed behind them. A faint ripple of applause came from the hallway. The remaining officers had gathered, having heard every word. They weren't clapping for Harper and Green, they were clapping for Walter. Final thoughts. What would you have done if you were in Walter's shoes? Do you think he handled the situation the right way? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you or someone you know ever experienced anything similar? Let us know. We want to hear your story. If you found this story eye-opening or inspiring, don't forget to give it a like and share it with others who care about making a difference.